Hello, everybody. We are live right
There you are.
now on my channel. Thanks for everyone for watching. I'm here today with my very first guest from a poet, Bryan Lucas. How are you today, sir?
How's it going, my friend? How's it going?
Everything's going good on my end.
Hmm.
Hopefully, again, you mentioned some connectivity issues. That happens, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Sometimes everything is clean as a whistle, and sometimes I'm, glitching out. But hopefully, that improves as we go along. But
Yeah.
yeah, being my first guest, I'd really, for those who don't know you, Bryan, I would just be interested in myself and my friends knowing a little bit more about you and your channel and kind of what you do and even how you got into the space, if
Yeah.
that's something you would like to talk about, because of course we're all sort of connected by the evil cult of Scientology, and it's fascinating for
Oh,
me when someone who's had being a never end has some sort of interest in it. So I'm just curious, again, how
uh,
everything kind of came together with yourself.
well, I'm doing some plugging. I kind of address it in this sort of.
Hmm.
Um, of course, my name's Bryan Lucas. I'm my early 50s. I was born in 72. So Gen X guy. I was born in West Virginia, but grew up in Arkansas. And that's where I live. In rural Arkansas. And again, how does someone from rural Arkansas become involved in the anti-Scientology space? A couple years ago, I got into an accident, and I ended up having to basically put myself in. I put myself in um, a self-imposed exile from society. It's kind of easy to do when you live out in the middle of nowhere, and you end up uh you know like not having access to transportation, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I put myself for various and sundry reasons into a self-imposed exile. And I'm uh so I started watching a lot of YouTube. And I I ran into the Danny Masterson trial coverage
Hmm.
through Andrew Gold.
Okay.
Right.
Hmm. Hmm.
So because I was watching a lot of of true crime, you know that stuff. It's the stuff that I call that stuff that happens to other people. I was watching a lot of that stuff. And uh, Andrew Gold, he started covering the trial a little bit, and that led me to Chris Shelton,
Hmm.
and then to Aaron Smith Levin, Mark and Claire, Mike, and then
Hmm.
Nora, blah blah blah. The rest of that part is history. Um, but if you want to go further back, I'd heard of Scientology a long time ago through the Dianetics, and of course Tom Cruise, and
Hmm.
uh, and John Travolta, Kirstie, all those guys. And I remember the commercials. The going into
Hmm.
Walden Books and seeing the displays in the mall, and going to the mall in the '80s and seeing that.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so I remember those, and it was just like I remember those commercials, and with the exploding volcano, and it was okay. This is weird. I'd never read any of L. Ron Hubbard's fiction, right? Because and it was really which is really interesting, which is really surprising because I've I started reading regularly as far as fiction, science fiction, fantasy fiction, like Asimov, Heinlein, Terry Brooks, um, people like that when I was like in seventh grade. But I don't remember ever seeing any Hubbard books in our library at school because I
Mm-hmm.
uh, I grew up in had a really small school, really tiny school, uh, and my history teacher, he he's the one who got me into reading, you know, science fiction and fantasy and stuff, and he never had any because he had his own little library that he would give us books, and he never had any Hubbard or anything like that, so I'd never read any of his stuff. And then, yeah, fast forward to 2015. 2015, I'm sitting in San Antonio because that's where I was living at the time, and Going Clear. I watched that, and it was just
Mm-hmm.
like I started watching that, and I could not stop watching it.
Yeah.
Okay, so learn a bunch,
Absolutely.
yeah, learn this, that, and the other out uh, um, from that, and then of course there's the Scientology and the Aftermath show, the Rimini show.
Mm-hmm.
So I watched, binge watched that after it was already over and done with, like in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it went from like 2017, 2018, 20, right around in there. Binge watched it, and then it was like, okay. Then ran into Andrew Gold, Aaron, Andrew Gold, Chris Shelton, Aaron, and the whole kit and caboodle. I was like, the SPTV space. I was there when it was coined. I was there when it was named.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all the little things that's been going on over the last 2 years, well, almost roughly 2 years. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's been an interesting journey. All the seeing all the people come and go, who stuck around, and even with what's going on right now with all the I don't like to I call it happenings. I don't like to call it drama with what's going on now, but with all the happenings that's going on now. So, hi Joe,
Well,
how's it going? Say hi
well,
to a few.
I'll tell you one thing. As an ex-Scientologist, you definitely missed absolutely nothing by reading Hubbard's fiction. It's trash, so don't worry about it.
Well,
Just want to say hi to Joe because
yeah,
we got some friends here, and of course, hi to Irish
yeah.
Mart here. Thanks so much for
Hi.
being here. You guys are the best. But
Nice to
yeah,
meet you.
just as a sci-fi fan myself,
Yeah,
Hubbard is. I read Battlefield Earth. I thought it was fine. I read the first volume of Mission Earth because someone gave it to me when I was on staff in Berlin, and it was just bad. So you're
yeah.
good. You're okay. You really haven't missed much.
No, I kind of figured that, and I've like with my writing and everything, like this thing right here, writing haikus and limericks,
Right.
right? Um, and let's get to. I've been a poet. Well, I've been writing a good part of my life.
Mhm.
Um, I actually started writing poetry when I was a teenager, and
Wow.
and off and on, but really in earnest in the past 10 years. I've
Mhm.
really been doing more of that. Because like I said, I went to a really small school, and then After I got out of high school, I tried college for a while, and then jumped from job to job. And then I went into the Navy. I was like
Okay.
30 when I went into the U.S. Navy. And that's another thing that actually kind of attracted me to the I know it's an unpleasant word in the rest of the world, but the W word, the
Right.
W,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that kind
Right.
of
Right.
hearing them refer to non-Scientologists is that too kind of because
That's right.
because in the Navy that word means a certain thing. It means someone who hasn't been below the equator on a deployment, or
Right. Right. Right.
And the first
Mhm.
time I'd ever heard of that word, it was gollywog or pollywog. Is
That's right.
what we were called. But I went my first deployment. I went around South America, so I've been
Mm.
below the equator. So I'm what they call an honorable shellback.
Okay.
So ain't no way I'm no filthy, filthy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
And
so
were you Brian? Were you enlisted or were you an officer in the
I
Navy?
was enlisted. I was enlisted.
Nice.
Yeah, I
Okay.
was.
There's
I was.
one thing that does fascinate me with Scientology is that sort of like naval crossover. They call the Sea Org the fake Navy,
Yeah.
but
Oh yeah.
they have naval ranks. So they
Oh yeah.
start off with what do they call it? Seamen, and then you have the three classes, and then the petty officers, and then the three chiefs, and then they
Mhm.
go into midshipmen, and then you go into the officer ranks, and the highest is Commodore, which of course is a rank that is normally used in wartime, from what I understand, because
Yeah.
otherwise it's called a rear admiral lower half. But that's like the highest rank. So that's
Well.
Hubbard. Hubbard is the Commodore of the Sea Org, and like David Miscavige is captain. The only thing I really know about the Navy is like the science fiction crossover with Star Trek, which has a similar ranking system. So you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I know that it's based
Well.
off the American Navy. I don't really know exactly the American Navy, but I know the equivalents in Star Trek. But
Well.
like
Let's this.
Commodore is the highest, and it's all
Well.
self-appointed, by the way. I mean, he gave himself that rank.
Yeah. Well. They don't use the Commodore. Actually, it used to be an actual
Yeah.
rank. Commodore actually used to be a rank. It used to
Okay.
be. It
Okay.
used to go from like let's just do the officers ranks just
Yeah.
for 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 a second. It was ensign, lieutenant JG, lieutenant,
Mhm.
and then you got lieutenant commander, captain, commodore,
Mhm.
rear admiral, vice admiral, admiral.
That's right.
All right.
That's right.
They officially got rid of the commodore rank sometime couple decades or so ago. It was well before that I joined, and switched it to the lower half.
Yeah.
Commodore is now an office. Okay,
Okay.
like you can be the commodore of a fleet, right? So
Okay.
like
Mhm.
the fifth fleet or the second fleet, or where they have the commodore. The commodore is the commander of it, right? And you can actually have a rank of a captain and be a commodore. It just depends on you are assigned that position, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, and well,
So yeah, so I know the Sea Org is based on this organization that
yeah,
supposedly Hubbard belonged to, called the Explorers Club. And I do know that you can, like, there are certain groups in the United States. They might not be considered military, the Merchant Marines or some kind of
yeah,
explorers club, where if it's a naval designation, they can kind of make up their own ranks, but they still base it on the US military, I think for nautical law purposes, because I
yeah,
think like there are private organizations that do these, and government organizations that go out and do fishing, or they whatever they're
yeah,
doing, right? Or they're doing transportation, they're
yeah.
on
That's
freighters or
much.
whatnot, they'll still have those rank systems. So that's really where the Sea Org kind of comes from. But people just call it the fake Navy. It's kind of facetious. It's
Yeah,
sort of like, again, it's like a merchant marine kind of thing if they weren't
yeah,
the merchant marines, or they were like a private yacht company if they really weren't like that. So it's
Mhm.
like it's in that vein, which I think for most civilians like myself, it finds a
Yeah.
little strange because I don't know if they do that in the army. Like I don't know if there's any other non-military ground forces organizations that have purely, that sergeant ranks or whatever. I think it's
Yeah.
just because the ocean is so vast that there's so many
Yeah.
organizations. But what do
Yeah.
I know?
Yeah.
I'm not
Like
sure.
well, for enlisted, for example, for what I was, you got you're a recruit, an apprentice, you're
Yeah.
a recruit, an apprentice, and then seaman, and then petty officer, third, second, and first, and then chief,
Yeah.
senior, master chief, and then you got there's four warrant officers,
Hmm.
and then you've got the officer rankings and stuff. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
But I
but
just,
but
again, I find that
yeah,
fascinating.
yeah, it's I don't know. Most of us sailors are once a sailor, always a sailor, and I find Hubbard an embarrassment. As- you know,
Yeah.
especially of all the stuff that he stole. All the stolen valor,
Yep.
the chest bars and all that other crap.
Right.
All the ceremonial trappings. You know that
Hmm.
that he took. And I could see why he did it. It's the outcomes of it, the lives destroyed. And everything that just really really it really gets my sense of honor of being a
Of course.
veteran and stuff. So
So I have a question for you, and before just after that, we'll go to our ancient history topic because we can talk
okay.
about like ancient naval stuff and too.
Yeah. Well,
But in the Navy, and in the 40s, he definitely served. He was either a lieutenant full or lieutenant JG. He was the commanding officer.
um yeah, I think he was an O3. I think he made O3. I
Yeah,
think he was lieutenant.
a full
um
lieutenant, but he was the commanding officer of like a was it like
yeah,
an
because
anti-sub, something like this, right? An anti-sub chaser, I think they call it,
yeah,
something like
yeah,
this.
uh,
But my whole thing is this, okay? Is so you might know this controversy, and this is sort of I would love to get your comment on it, being a veteran. So the
yeah,
controversy is that there's two sets of L. Ron Hubbard's permanent records. There's the records of Scientology, which again you probably know, as most people here, he was a war hero, and then there's the actual naval office information, office saying that he was just sort of mediocre. So when his son brought him to court in the early 80s, they hired a guy named L. Fletcher Putri, who was a chief of staff at the Air Force, and
yeah,
which is a very high rank. I think he's a brigadier general in the Air Force. And he
yeah,
used the term sheep dipped because he believed that Hubbard's permanent records were sheep dipped because Hubbard was an intelligence officer and he was, on this post infiltrating the Jack Parsons and things like this. So I'm curious. I don't know anything. I mean, I know the basics of military intelligence, and I've studied things about covert ops and whatever to a very, I'm a civilian, so very broad. But have you ever heard of the term sheep dip? Is that something that would be in common? And do you think it would happen to Hubbard?
no and no. um
Yeah.
no and no. uh I'm pretty sure that what can be found in the public record about LR, Hubbard's naval service is actually what happened. That he was
Right.
basically because still at that time he got his ranking because of his dad.
Mm-hmm.
You could still get assigned back then. You could still get assigned rankings. You didn't these days. You guys to have a basic. You got to have a college degree in order to become an officer to begin with these days. And
Right.
back then, you really didn't have to per se, especially during wartime. You know, you know. So, most likely, the misadventures of Hubbard are exactly what they are reported to have been. You know, because after a certain time, a lot of that, so, the people that are involved are dead and all that stuff can
Yeah.
come out, because how long ago did the Project MK Ultra or all that other crap finally get declassified, and all the stuff from the UFO phenomena all just get declassified. So yeah,
Sure.
so most likely Hubbard was a very piss poor officer.
Yeah.
And believe me, I've served under piss poor officers, and I served under good officers. And yeah, he was probably one of those that he was lucky he was lucky his enlisted didn't freaking throw him overboard. Yeah,
Yeah.
he was lucky. He was lucky but yeah, yeah. The what was the sheep dip?
That's what
Uh,
L. Fletcher Buttrey, when he was now
yeah,
he was hired on Scientology to
yeah.
look at both records and basically probably came up with this because he got paid. So what did he care? But yeah,
Now,
that was the sheep dipped.
me being I was just a lowly enlisted guy, so I actually had a security clearance. I had a basic secret security clearance because I was an agent.
Mhm.
I was an Aegis FC.
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Aegis weapon system. Probably
I
not.
have not actually, no.
Okay.
But yeah,
Uh,
no.
Jeff Jeffrey Augustine
Okay.
actually.
Mhm.
Jeffrey Augustine was a technical writer for the Aegis program. I remember him talking about it with John Poe one time. I
Oh
actually need to.
wow.
I actually need to. I actually need to talk to Jeffrey Augustine about that. Maybe because what I did was I worked on the little destroyers and cruisers. The little ships. So I was just a little bitty peon. I didn't have. And there are people that I knew that you could just tell that they were in the know,
Right.
and they couldn't tell you stuff that and a lot of it depended upon your job and what your yeah, basically what your job was.
Mhm.
I worked on air defense radar, so it wasn't very much need
Okay.
for me to for me to know the secret squirrel stuff and stuff. So it was funny that right before I got separated out, I was actually working on some. I was out in Las Cruces, New Mexico, at White Sands
Mhm.
Weapons Station, or the White Sands
Wow.
Research Facility. There was some interesting stuff going on there, but as far as all that goes, no. Hubbard was
Yeah.
Hubbard was a shitty sailor. That's just to put it
Right.
plain. He was not a very good sailor, not a very good commander, because the way the system is set up, it usually flushes those people out, you know,
Right.
and stuff. So, but yeah, the sheep dipping is something that no doesn't sound. I never ran into that term until well recently, and then but yeah, no.
Yeah, it seems like again, when you hire experts sometimes for
Mm-hmm.
lawsuits and that they're being paid by an organization, you do have to take it with a grain of salt because they are just,
Mm-hmm.
motivated by profit as anyone else. It's the same with, in lawsuits, sometimes a defendant or a plaintiff will hire their own coroner to
Yeah,
review something. And of course, they're going to find whatever their client wants. But anyway, speaking of, I'm fascinated with military history. Like,
yeah,
just even since I was a kid, like war movies are my favorite movies of all time. So
Yeah.
military organization and things like this have always just been fascinating. It could be one of the reasons why, when you're told about Hubbard and stuff like that, he's this war hero and whatever.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. And obviously the respect that we have for veterans,
Yeah.
combat veterans, non-combat veterans, doesn't matter. But anyway, it's all a thing. But I wanted to segue into, because I appreciate your insight in that.
Mhm.
And I really wanted to segue into a sort of like ancient history, because one of the interesting things about Scientology
Yeah.
is the idea that you can connect to ancient history, and that because we've always sort of lived these multiple lives, it's sort of, something that happens a lot where people uncover their ancient histories. And even Hubbard decided that, he was certain people at certain times and whatever. And you mentioned Going Clear. So Going Clear, there's a woman called Hannah Ardringer, and I
Yeah.
forget her
Yeah.
name now.
I
Forgive
know
me.
Hannah. Yeah,
And
Hannah.
she mentions that like they'd go to North Africa. Hubbard said there was a temple somewhere, and there was a temple. Like that's probably all BS. Maybe he knew before by paying people, but at the same time, it's interesting, this treasure hunting, this idea, and so forth. So to me,
Well,
that's really another interesting connection to Scientology. So I'm curious about your thoughts about that as well.
it reminds me of two things. Um,
Yeah.
I like watching. I'm subscribed to the Great Courses Plus, uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
and they got this one professor that's on there. Greg Eldreddy is his name, and he's a pretty interesting guy. And he had a quote that I uh, that comes to mind whenever I think of past lives. Because if there is such a thing as past life, most likely you're a farmer, a farmer, a farmer, a farmer, and oh yeah, a farmer.
Yeah.
That's all I got to say about that. Okay. Also, also the temple thing. The temple thing. There's this writer. Oh crap. Oh, in the early 1800s, he was pretty famous, and uh, he uh, oh crap, it might have been through the Aldretti too, because they had this theory about these stones that had these channels in it,
Right.
being like sacrificial altars and stuff, and they were all over the place in North Africa, when in all actuality they were olive presses.
Right.
So yeah, as far as ancient history, that's it. I personally am an agnostic. There is some spiritual stuff out there, but most likely, that you weren't in a past lives or past lives, you didn't know, because you can't you can't have 100 people being Jesus Christ in a past life.
Exactly. And
Exactly.
that's what, yeah. My whole
So
thing now, being sort of what I call an ex or a recovering Scientologist, is listen, I don't particularly believe in past lives, but I could be
yeah,
completely and utterly wrong. But
yes,
you're absolutely correct. No one would have been Genghis Khan or Hernan
yeah,
Cortez or
yeah,
Jesus or
yeah,
whatever. We would have been some schmo who was either a farmer, a peasant, a serf, maybe if we were lucky, a duke or a baron that actually owned
if,
land.
if,
But
if you
with the czar or whatever, that's not who we were. Would
if
have
you were
been just schmoes.
if you were unlucky, you would have lived in if you were unlucky, you would have lived in in an urban area and died of a disease.
Exactly. Yeah,
if you
and something
and
curable
if you
today.
were lucky,
Cholera. Yeah.
you would have been a farmer, and you would have died of a tooth of an abscess, and a tooth abscess from getting
True.
your wisdom teeth. Do you know Simon Whistler, right?
Which one? I'm sorry, Brian.
Do you know who Simon Whistler is?
Oh, yeah, I think so. He's an English gentleman, right? He does a lot
Yeah,
of
he's
stuff
the
on
same.
YouTube, right?
This is,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
like it. A quote of his is, "The past was the worst." It was. The past was the worst. It's- people
yeah,
might people might long for simpler times, and there's a thing about simpler times. But what they long for is they long for that
yeah,
innocence, right? There ain't
yeah.
no way in hell I would want to go back to live in ancient Rome. First of all,
No.
it was freaking nasty, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Public sanitation is great, you know.
Well, exactly. The fact that we have sewers.
Hmm.
I mean, come on. That's a good thing. I
Yeah,
know. No, again, what it is, it's even wanting people. I know it's very
mhm.
popular in America. It's spreading all over the world where, they want to go back even to the 50s. But like, if you look like us, the 50s were great. If you didn't
Yeah,
look like us, Brian, the 50s were not great in the United States. You know what I
exactly,
mean? Like, you have to
exactly,
acknowledge that, like,
exactly. It's like exactly. You can't. Excuse me. Exactly.
of
It's
course.
out. It's this. If you want to get into the political thing that's going on now, you've got a certain set. You've got a certain set of very pissed off people,
Yeah.
and they don't know why they're pissed off.
Yeah.
And you've got another set of people who are taking advantage of that anger
Hmm.
and that uncertainty, and they're raking it in. Hubbard did the same damn thing.
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
know, it's he was at the brass tacks of it. L. Ron Hubbard was a con man and a grifter.
Yeah.
The brass tacks of our politics today. Most of the people involved in politics today, especially on the national level, are con men and
Yeah.
grifters. You know,
Absolutely.
you know, very few of them, are genuine. Very and stuff. Not to get into politics too much, but anyway, I don't like the way that a lot of things have as far as our the political as far as the state of our politics here in the United States. I don't like the way that you know it could go
Yeah.
because like you said, if it went one way, people that look like us, white, male, straight, we're not, unless we think a certain way, it's not going to affect us too much per
Right.
se. But I don't think that way. you
Yeah.
know, I
True.
like I like to think for
True.
myself, and
All right, which can always get you thrown in prison, but who knows?
oh
But
yeah,
what I think too, I think the obsession with the past is because, of course, the first is we personally don't have any firsthand experience with it, and the past is always romanticized. So, like you
yeah,
mentioned, with the Roman Empire, okay,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
again, if you were a senator, if you were a priest, if you lived in the city walls, it was great. If you were a slave, it wasn't great. If you were a soldier, it was probably okay, but not great. But
Nope.
what was your life expectancy anyway? 30, 35, maybe 40
You were
if you were
lucky.
lucky. And then again, you have to take advantage of all these things of like people died of simple
Yeah,
bacterial infections and
yeah.
viruses, and then
Hmm.
the war and the barbarians. And I mean, how horrific would it have been to be a Roman in like North England, and then all of a sudden, one day out of nowhere, you're being murdered by Saxons? Like, that's the horror of like everything's going fine, and one day out of the blue you just see a bunch of horses off in the distance. You
Or
have no idea whether they're coming to trade with you or they're coming to murder you, and then you end up
or
getting murdered and
yeah,
displaced.
or
Like,
converse,
or
or
whomever you can
yeah,
yeah.
you could be somebody, some farmer in some Eastern European country, just living your life, and the next thing you know, the freaking Roman legions are coming to. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
No Twitter, no Facebook, no nothing to be like, hey, maybe we should evacuate.
yeah.
But one of the things too that I think is interesting is ancient technology. So I remember
Yeah.
taking a class when I was an undergrad that looked at ancient civilization in South America and
Yep.
how specifically the Mayans, the Incas, and the Aztecs were pretty advanced. Their
Oh
cities
God,
were
yeah.
very advanced. And I always remember what stayed with me was I think it was the Aztecs. They used to actually freeze dry potatoes, which they did by digging certain like things underground and using
Hmm.
either the heat or the cooling of the ground of the earth
Hmm.
to freeze things. And this was a concept that blew the minds of the Spanish. But of
Hmm.
course, they ended up slaughtering everybody. But I just think sometimes we take that, like I think people who are on one side by saying, well, the ancients knew nothing. And then of course you have the total other side, which is the ancients were in contact with aliens. It's like there must be a middle here. Like, yes, they were advanced, but no, I don't think aliens built the pyramids. But they knew quite a
No.
bit, and they
Yeah.
had their
Yeah.
own versions of
And
science and medicine and technology and engineering,
yeah,
you know.
and unfortunately, that what was it in a lot of a lot of some of the podcasts that I listened to was another quote. Someone said, they say that the victors are are the people that wrote stuff down,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Well, the people who wrote stuff down to begin with were the real victors, because
Yeah.
the all this, the ancient engineering and all that other stuff. Well, one of the reasons we don't know how they did it is because they didn't write the damn stuff down
That's right.
because it wasn't important to them.
Yeah.
It was more
Yeah.
important, like for example, the methods that they used to quarry stone for the pyramids. They just did
Right.
it. They did. They didn't. The engineers were more worried about. They were more worried about completing the structure for their pharaoh, their god, or their the living or however, because it was all a lot of it was tied into religion because
Hmm.
politics and all politics and religion were we these days, especially in the West, see it as something separate.
Right.
Back then, it was religion and then politics. You know,
Hmm.
and it was the method that they used to to do this, that, or the other. Like I said, wasn't the important thing to them. It was the fact that they needed to get the job done.
That's
You
right.
know, because of their culture. We have a different culture. We like
Mhm.
to know why things are the way they are. And which is not bad. Which is not a bad way to be. Especially
Mhm.
if you I love the fact scientific method and all the other stuff. Um, uh, anyways, I just brain fart. So, anywho,
And I know with modern science, a lot of that stuff comes only
yeah.
within the past couple 100 years anyways. So, like, before, a lot of knowledge was based in experience and doing things, which
Mhm.
is, as you're sort of emphasizing, they just did stuff. The Romans built the aqueducts. They didn't have any mathematical equations. They just figured it out
Yeah,
practically. And
and
then later, really only later, are engineers now studying it from a mathematical point of view, but they
well,
just did it. Like they didn't have, as you mentioned, any choice. They
it,
needed water to go to their villages, or they needed to build a dam
yeah,
or a bridge, so they just did it.
and who's to say that they didn't write stuff down,
That's
right?
true, of course, of
Because
course.
stuff doesn't
Yeah,
survive.
yeah.
We are spoiled when it comes to information. You know, especially in the last 500 years. Five
Mhm,
600 years with the invention of the printing press and all that stuff. But even in the past
mhm.
several decades, you know, you're Gen X, right?
Technically millennial, but I like to think of myself as a Gen X. I was born in
Okay.
'83, So I'm
Hey,
like way more Gen X than millennial,
okay,
but basically,
you
you know.
you you remember when
I
these
still
things?
remember I still remember Cobain, so that's why. I remember Kurt Cobain and Nirvana, so yeah.
You
Yeah,
remember when these were like "Beam Me Up,
I
Scotty"?
know.
You know,
Yeah,
when
exactly.
these
Yeah.
were the I'm from the generation. I I grew up. Well, I grew up. They still had freaking party lines,
Right.
phone party
Yes.
lines out here when I was a
I
kid.
remember
Okay,
those
when we
commercials.
yeah, and then when we first got when out here specifically when we first got our first phone that I remember, right, a landline with a cord and all that stuff.
Mhm.
You only had to dial the last five numbers of the telephone number to do something
That's
local.
right. That's right.
For the other area, it was just seven numbers. It wasn't the area code or anything. So I remember the past as I remember a time when we couldn't get online and talk here and
Mhm.
and who for but um I forgot where I was going with this, but um oh yeah, it's people don't remember. We are a we can be a very short-sighted species. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And and it's up to us. It's up to those of us that do remember the past, that study the
Mhm,
past,
mhm.
but also can can concentrate on the now, but be mindful of the future. And that's a really hard balance to to keep because, like I said, most people don't give a shit about the past. Okay, it was just a bunch of
Yeah.
dates, bunch of they're more worried about putting food on their table, you know, getting their kids back and forth to school and all that other stuff, and then then to worry about the trends in history or politics or whatever that could lead to whatever might be there in the future. They just don't.
That's
It's
right.
not in their programming, the wheelhouse, or whatever. So it's up to people like me who like that stuff, who can think about that stuff. And unfortunately, I know my voice is kind of a little tiny, 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 and there are larger voices out there,
Mhm.
but I'm trying.
Oh, it's good to try. Listen,
Yeah.
I know that they say that the definition of cynicism is to believe that people are naturally selfish, but in a certain way, they kind of are. And
Oh yeah.
selfish can be very bad, of course, but it also could just mean you're
Yeah.
focusing on yourself and the people around you. So kind of true, because you're right. There's very, very few people who are going to look at macro geopolitics and the
Yeah.
evolution of women's rights and stuff like
Yeah.
that's a good thing to think about.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we all have to eat, and at the end of the day, we all
Yeah.
have to be somehow happy and
Because
take care of the people we love. So we have to do it on a very micro level as
yeah,
well.
because
And
90
yeah, these big heady things are for
yeah.
just a different group of people, which is okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because 90% of reality is right here. Mark one eyeball.
Right.
And yeah, yeah, it's because you can it's a story, another story I like to tell.
Sure. Go ahead.
I don't know have you ever heard of the Winnebago? You've heard of the Winnebagos, right?
Yeah, actually, my father used to sell them in his dealership, so been in a few of them from time to time.
Okay, well, Winnebagos is actually an Indian tribe or Native American tribe.
Okay.
Okay,
Mhm.
look up the Winnebago trickster cycle. Okay, because they had this
Yeah.
trickster, you know, um, which I studied these in college back in the 90s when I was a young lad, and so
Mhm.
they kept with me as okay, because so trickster he's walking along, uh, and there's a lake up above up near him, and he sees someone pointing in the distance at the shore of the lake, pointing over across the lake at the village,
Yeah.
and he's hey, wondering what's going on. And he goes, "Hey, brother, what's going on?" He's yelling at whoever it is back there, and still the guy's pointing. So he gets mad and he goes, basically threatens the guy, "I'm going to kick your butt because you're not telling me, what it is. And he's, gets all in a huff, and he's going towards the guy, bound and determined to teach him a lesson. And when he gets close enough to him, he sees it's a stump with a branch sticking out, pointing towards the village across the lake.
Right. Right. Yeah.
The point is,
Yeah. Perspective.
Investigate before you come to conclusions, and most likely
Right.
you won't trick yourself.
Yeah. That's a good story. It's a good parable.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Again, one of the many things that I think is again extremely fascinating is just what we're also learning now. So coming from Canada, when
Yeah.
I was growing up, also in the 90s and a little bit into the 2000s, we never really studied too much about Indigenous histories in Canada. And now it's kind of like
Oh,
mandated for high school students to take Indigenous history courses and actually study like Indigenous literature and
it's
Indigenous like
fascinating.
poetry and so forth,
It's
which I think is
fascinating.
really cool. Yeah,
The
exactly.
stuff.
It's like
The
something
stuff
because I'm ignorant of all that stuff.
Yeah, because I took a lot of literature. I took, being a writer, being, originally when I originally got out of high school, it was writing, and I was trying to, get a degree in literature and all that stuff, and that didn't happen. Only, it was just like in my 30s is when the history, when it was like, switched over to history, kind of that developed too. And also I helped my mom get her degree in history, but that's a different story.
Wow. That's nice.
What were we talking about again?
Indigenous histories.
Oh, Indigenous histories. Okay. I took a American. It was called American Provincial Literature, right? So it was all the literature from American history, from from basically Columbus or whatever up until the Revolution. All right.
Okay. Okay.
And that's how that's how I actually started, got to study those, because the professor, Dr. Schumacher, he was an interesting fella. I even remember his name. That's how much of an impact it actually made on me. Hearing especially the he's got several other the trickster cycles are really, really funny. And yes, but we didn't study here growing, like I said, I went to high school in the 80s, when that stuff was not as, it was still it was not as politically, no, we did stuff then that was not considered politically correct, especially when it comes to the natives and all that stuff. Indians and the Braves were still a thing, and the tomahawk chop and
the Redskins,
Redskins.
Yeah.
I come from I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I come from a not as easily offended generation.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But progress, progress. But yeah, it's fast. That stuff is fascinating, and I'd like to know more of it, because a lot of people, here in the United States should know more about what came before, pre-Columbian stuff, and it's it's fascinating hearing all the stories from them, from Mayan, from it seems like it was the Central American and South American native cultures were more apt to write stuff down and everything. It's really sad. It's really sad that all that knowledge and experience and everything, because they didn't look the way that the people with the guns looked, or they didn't worship the way the people with the guns worshipped.
Yeah,
But
that was, the conquest of Mesoamerica, which was
yeah,
basically started with Cortez, and then
yeah,
after his whole, uh, the whole conquistadors who wanted gold and
yeah,
silver, and they just
yep,
completely pillaged and plundered that whole entire continent, and then went down, of course, and the Incas and whatever, and so many civilizations that were just destroyed. But
yep.
the only thing we really have of that, and I do have a copy, is a book of Hernan Cortez's diary, which is, like
Hmm.
one of the only things there. But I wish we did have more history. But of
Yeah.
course, that's what happens, right? History is often written by the victors.
Well,
But
yes.
what can you do?
Yeah. What can you do? Well, you can only go forward. That's the thing. You can
Exactly.
look to the, like I said, look to the past,
Yeah.
balance it with what's going on today, and going forward, which is harder to do than. Like,
Mhm.
anyways, my brain's up mush now, so I guess we can
Oh,
wrap.
go right ahead. So before you go, Brian, because I'm just going to go through some start stuff, which you don't have to
Yep.
join us for. It's okay. I do want people to buy your book. I just want them to know where can they find you online, and where can they find to purchase your book of poetry.
Okay. There's on Amazon.
Sure.
If you if you search on Amazon all about Scientology, mine's like the first thing that comes up as far as the list goes. I have two things. I have where's the other thing? Where? This is my other one. It's called Memories Carved in So Much Dust,
Wow.
and that's a non-Scientology related poetry. And then there's all about Scientology, my Scientology haikus and limericks. With actually, I got the forward by Liz Gale, and
Nice. Very
Claire,
nice.
Claire Headley actually wrote a little thing for me for this too.
That's great.
Yep,
So what I'll do is I'll put the links to the Amazon in the description of the video,
yep.
because I'd love to see
Sure.
more people get your work. But thank you,
Let me
Brian. Anytime you want to
let
do
me.
this again, you just let me know, and I appreciate your
Yeah,
time.
we will. Next time, let's be a little bit. We can be a little. We'll figure something out for next time. Anyways, I'll talk to you
Yeah,
later,
no worries. Of course.
everybody.
Have a good one, Brian.
You too. Bye.
So I just want to conclude with some start comments here that I didn't get an opportunity to go through. The first one here is, yeah, very interesting, the Denny Masterson thing. Yeah, interesting, the Denny Masterson thing got me watching AA Ron and co channels. Yeah. Um. Wow. That was such a horrific thing with Denny Masterson. I really haven't commented on it because, again, I'm not into the legal stuff, the legal side of Scientology. But it doesn't surprise me. Even many, many years ago, 5+ years ago, when a lot of the stuff was just rumblings, a lot of people on Facebook contacted me who knew I was an ex-Scientologist for my opinion, and I would say, of course, I don't have any firsthand knowledge, but I do believe the victims, the Jane Does and others, because this is something Scientology has done numerous amounts of times. So it absolutely, all the conspiracy and all the hush up and all the whatever else is just something that doesn't surprise me at all. Clearwater Chess says, fake calzone. You're a fake fraud, phony, and a bum. You know that grip. Good afternoon from NYC. Thank you so much for being here, Black Boots. Again, thank you. You're one of our few sort of half dozen people, or maybe a little bit more, who's a constant regular on here. So I always appreciate the fact that you join us, and thank you so much again for being here. Pete Panzerotti was dipped in marinara sauce in Hell's Kitchen, New York City. That was referring to sheep dip. You're not wrong about that, by the way. You're not wrong about that. And Pete and Grip will have a one-on-one, I think, sometime around Halloween, because Halloween is the 1 year anniversary of me bringing Pete into this world. Which, whether you like him or not, it's just a fact, right? Isn't it the truth? Many people claim to be Cleopatra. So that's one thing that, when I left Scientology, I watched a lot of videos from Tori Christman, and she always claimed that in the 70s in Los Angeles, in the Asho building, which was at a different place on Temple something Boulevard or Avenue. That at a certain point they would go across the street to a diner, and at a certain point in Scientology history, you were allowed to talk about your auditing sessions. You can't do that anymore because most women found themselves to be Cleopatra. Most men were, Caesar or something like that. And then the decree came down that you can't talk about your case anymore. Pete Panzerotti was dipped in oyster sauce, not kosher, by triads. Is this in Tunochi Road? When Chai District, Hong Kong? Listen, man, if you say so, it's just unfortunately it wouldn't be oyster sauce because even though Pat is a good old Catholic boy, the person who plays Pat isn't. So it's not on my contract to eat non-kosher food. So you know how it is. Yeah, Brian's a very interesting guy. We were on with I was on, I guess, last week now because it's Sunday. I can say last week, midweek. With Marilyn because Marilyn was doing her own live, and we're talking about ancient history. And I mentioned I was going to do my my live that I did yesterday, which I do hope everyone enjoyed, which was on the Jewish movements and ethnic divisions from the Second Temple era into modern day. And Brian just contacted me and said, "Hey, let's just talk about ancient history." So we'll do more with Brian. He's a really great guy. He's been a supporter since I've seen him online, and he's a great person. So we'll do more for sure. And I do want to get a live done. I still got to get a live done with Aaron, and I still got to get one done with Marilyn to sort of boost some of my channel analytics, so to speak. And then yeah, Pete's got to get one over Griff. He will. Griff is a bum, and you know what I mean. He's just a bum. That's all it is. That's what we can say. He's out there on Sheridan Drive, which I like to call Sheridan Boulevard, or Niagara Falls Boulevard. At the back of fast food restaurants. Rummaging through the what is it called? The garbage there, the garbage bins, and he's got. I just picture him with sauce all over his face, drunk off his ass somewhere. So we gotta get all those lawsuits pinned down to zero. And thank Black Boots. Yeah, I spent a little bit of time there doing those PowerPoints, and I was actually still editing even a couple hours before just to make everything more concise. And I was very happy with it in the end because I actually added a few more slides, just as I said, an hour or two before we went live, which kind of made everything, I think, coalesce a little more and made everything better and more comprehensible. So if you are watching this again, please like this video. Please subscribe. I'm going to add links to Brian's books into the description. Please go ahead and consider, buying his books. He's such a good guy, and we'll have him on again. Now that I can have on guests, we will simul stream the next time we do something between Griff Calzone and Pete Panzerotti. We will do a simultaneous live. I also have other friends like Chad. We can do some stuff. Joe, we can do some stuff if you want, and then other people. So whomever wants to come on can come on to do interviews and things like this. The other thing is, of course, will have a live on Wednesday. If you would like to, please go to the community tab on my channel and you can vote for the next topic, which were previous rejected topics. Either we're going to talk about science versus scientism, or can Scientology reform? And if you want a little basic definition of each, just to maybe sway your opinion one way or another, is that science, of course, is a wonderful, wonderful study of the natural world using the scientific method. But scientism tends to go a little step further, which kind of gets into the idea that like science can explain everything. It can sort of explain and will prove metaphysical, ethical questions, and there's some debate on whether or not science can do that. So we're going to look about the extremes and the limitations of science, but also look at what science is and how it also developed. And then in addition to that, we have can Scientology reform, and this is something where a lot of people have thoughts on it, and I would like to sort of look at that from perspectives of other religions. and how some religions have very hierarchical structures and very dogmatic structures, but others are more free, I guess, in one sense, more like Catholic versus Protestant. Catholics tend to be very structured, Protestants tend to be more what they call congregationalist. So, whichever one you're more interested in, just click, and I'll be back on Wednesday, and then on the following Saturday. Again, I always like to say, we're starting on 12 noon if you live in the Pacific time zone in North America. It's at 3 p.m. in the afternoon if you're on the Eastern time zone, which is also 8 p.m. if you're in the UK, and then where I am, or most parts of Europe, Central Europe, whatever, it's 9 p.m., which is the same time we started today. So please let me know what you like. Um, Anoni, just send me the title and the author. You can put it in the comments of the chat. I don't mind it. There's a lot of books that I'm reading. So if it's one I've read or haven't read, I'll put it on my list, and or do some research in it, see if I can find it. And I'm always up for book recommendations, by the way, because I gave my own a few weeks ago. So it's probably better just to, just to put it in the comments, or something like this, but I don't mind at all. And thank you for being here. I don't think I've actually seen your name here. So I appreciate you coming on. Please like and subscribe. And I also very much appreciate your message. And then thank you so much. Yeah, looking forward to Wednesday. Thank you, Irish Mart. It's always great to see, the friends that we have made here, and the supporters that are here. And thank you guys just so immensely. I really, really hope that you enjoyed this stream with Bryan. Please, again, please like my video. Please subscribe to my channel. Trying to get monetized, and I'm trying to build this more so I can do more lectures and things like this. But honestly, still having a great time doing this. I really don't mind that we're doing this on a small scale, because I really have been happy and very proud with the content so far, and I'm hoping it will only get better with more subscribers and with more time. So, in case I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.